Next on TOONDISE, it's an all-new episode of GameView. It's time for GameView, television and video game reviews. And now, Scott Thal.
Hey guys, welcome back to GameView. Now, tonight we need to go over a couple of things. First and foremost, the Nintendo Switch Lite. That was just announced 2 days ago, and it kind of caught me off guard because I was wrong. I did not think Nintendo was going to release a Switch that did not literally switch between handheld and home console modes, but they did, and I want to give you guys my thoughts on that. Also, we need to talk about Game Freak, because we now know why Pokémon Sword and Shield don't have all the Pokémon in them, and it's not just because of developer time crunch, it's actually a much worse reason. So we need to go over that. And lastly, we are going to end the night by talking about Nintendo Switch Online. Miyamoto was talking to Nintendo's shareholders at their annual meeting, and he was trying to convince them that Nintendo's online infrastructure and service is not behind the times compared to, let's say, Sony and Microsoft. And, yeah, that did not go over well, and he was not fooling anyone. So we definitely need to talk a little bit about that. Before we get started, though, as always, if you guys enjoyed tonight's episode, make sure to hit that like button. Also, subscribe to TOONDISE and click that bell icon for notifications. And don't forget to visit us on our website, toondice.com. So, we are going to jump right into things with the Nintendo Switch Lite. Now, I was completely wrong on this because, as I mentioned to you guys, I think it was either a week or two ago, I did not think Nintendo was actually going to release a Switch that did not literally switch between handheld and home console modes. But apparently they did. So here we go with the Nintendo Switch Lite. Basically, it's $100 cheaper than the flagship model, and yes, they did use the term flagship, I guess in a way to sort of ease people who've bought the original model that, you know what, keep it if you don't want like a handheld-only version. But it's $199.99, so $200. I figured it would be around that price tag. And it plays pretty much all of the games that the regular Switch does, except only in handheld mode. But what's interesting about this, there are additional restrictions. And Nintendo put up this entire chart on their website to essentially differentiate the main Switch from the Switch Lite, and I think this is going to cause some confusion, especially when it comes to parents. So we have to go over this. So first off, the Nintendo Switch Lite, as I mentioned, there is no TV mode. You cannot dock it. It can only be played as a handheld system. There's no tabletop mode either, although I guess technically if you were able to lean the Switch Lite on something, it could essentially be classified as tabletop, but there's no kickstand on the back of it, so unless someone is going to hold it for you, I suppose, but they say that's not available. No Joy-Con controllers, because everything is integrated into one single unit. No HD rumble included, and no IR motion camera. Which again does make sense because you don't really need it when, you know, the controls are basically locked together with the screen itself. Now, a couple of other things that are interesting as well. So, with the Switch Lite, it actually has a traditional D-pad on the left side. And I don't know why Nintendo couldn't do this with the regular Joy-Cons, because pretty much all of us don't like the setup of the 4 directional buttons on the left Joy-Con under the left control stick. That's actually one of the reasons why most of the time I play my games in docked mode, like I told you guys, just so I can use the Pro Controller and the traditional D-pad. But I'm curious why they chose to go that route. Very interesting nonetheless. The other thing that is interesting to note as well, with the Switch Lite, other than the obvious, right? I mean, it's smaller, it's a little bit lighter. The battery life is not that much better than the original Switch. So you think of the Switch we have right now, and supposedly, according to Nintendo, you're supposed to get something like 3 to 6 hours out of this thing in terms of battery life. I've never gotten 6 hours, okay? I don't know anyone who has been able to get 6 hours out of battery life out of their Switch, unless maybe you're just leaving the thing on and not actually playing a game, just like leaving it on the home menu, I suppose. Just from my own personal experience, most of the time I'm getting 3 to 3.5 hours. And that's even with turning everything off, right? Turning off Wi-Fi, turning the sound down to 0, turning off Bluetooth, minimizing the brightness. So I can't ever get more than 3 to 3.5 hours out of my Switch. With this new Switch Lite, supposedly you can get 4 hours to 7 hours, which again isn't really a lot. I mean, it's only like an hour more, and this is supposed to be a handheld console. So it's disappointing. I would definitely not buy this if you already have a Switch, like I do, because it just doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, to get, we'll be conservative here, right? To get, we'll say, an extra hour, maybe an hour and a half out of the battery, but other than that, I mean, you're not really getting anything else out of the system. It's not like it's going to run games faster, it's not like it's going to minimize load times even further. It's essentially the same thing like the regular Switch, except at a cheaper price point, designed for handheld use only, to try to get more people to buy a Switch, I guess. Or more specifically, to get parents to buy a Switch, whereas before, right, they may not have wanted to spend $299. Now that it's $100 cheaper, okay, maybe it's a little bit more enticing in that sense. There is a problem, though, and this is where I mentioned the confusion is definitely going to set in. With the Switch Lite, because of the removal of certain features, I mean, it still has the NFC for Amiibo, it still has the gyroscope for motion controls, but with the removal of certain features here, specifically the Joy-Con controllers, the detachable controllers, some games are just not going to run on the Switch Lite until you purchase additional accessories, like an additional separate pair of Joy-Cons. Now, there aren't a whole lot of games that this really affects. I think in the trailer, the main one they were talking about was 1-2 Switch. I don't think anyone is really interested in 1-2 Switch at this point. But there is one game, a big first-party game, that this does affect, and it's Super Mario Party. Because this is a core Mario Party game that, if you can remember, does not work in handheld mode. It does not work with the Pro Controller. In fact, it only works with the Joy-Cons detached from the system. So I can see this happening, unfortunately, and this is the risk Nintendo runs by creating a handheld-only unit. I can see this happening where parents go out to Walmart or Best Buy or GameStop, they buy a Switch Lite for their kids, for their birthday, for Christmas, and they buy Super Mario Party, and they take it home, the kids open up their presents, they pop the cartridge in, and then they find out, oh, I can't actually play the game because I don't have separate Joy-Con controllers. And then the question ends up becoming, will that end up enticing the parents to actually buy those separate controllers? And the answer to that, I think, is no, because are you really going to go out and spend $70 or $80 on a pair of Joy-Cons, and then spending even more money on a Joy-Con charging grip, because you need a way to charge them, right? Just to play Super Mario Party, and, I mean, to spend what ultimately ends up being like $100, I don't think they're going to do that. At the same time, I don't think employees at Walmart or Best Buy or GameStop are actually going to take the time to educate the parents or whoever's buying the system to say, hey, if you do buy this system, you better make sure these games that you're also buying are compatible, because some of them are not. I think they're just going to sell the person the system and the games, and then they're gonna be out of luck, because they're gonna take the stuff home, they're gonna open the games, take them out of the packaging, they won't be able to return them, and then they're gonna be stuck with essentially a game that they can't play. Again, I want to say specifically this applies to Super Mario Party. You guys will have to let me know if there are any other games that also require the Joy-Cons as the only method of being able to play the games. But yeah, like I said, I don't think 1-2 Switch is going to be an issue. Most people don't buy that, they're not interested in that. But Super Mario Party, a lot of people are interested in it, and it is a core Mario Party game. So here we have a core Mario Party game because of an incredibly stupid decision by ND Cube, who created the game and decided to force the usage of Joy-Cons instead of allowing a Pro Controller, instead of allowing handheld mode. Now we are at that point where this game is not compatible with the Switch Lite unless you spend the extra money. I don't think people are going to spend the extra money on it, but at the same time, I don't think parents are going to get this one right, especially, again, if they're buying it for their kids and they don't really take the time to educate themselves on the fact that this system, it's missing a lot of features and it's resulting in some incompatibility with some key first-party titles here. So anyways, we'll see what happens. I think the Switch Lite is going to sell well. Again, I'm not going to buy one myself because I've got the regular Switch, and again, 95% of the time I'm playing it in docked mode, so I don't see the point to getting the Switch Lite. But for someone who doesn't already have a Switch and they don't care about playing it on a 60-inch television, I guess you can save the $100 by going with this. It does come in 3 colors, gray, yellow, and turquoise, so it is nice to see that there are other colors aside from just gray, like we've all been stuck with up until now. There's also, of course, the Nintendo Switch Lite Zacian and Zamazenta edition, because we all knew that Game Freak was going to try to monetize the heck out of this, right? I do like how in that special edition you've got the control pad and the ABXY buttons and the control sticks in different colors, so that's nice. And like we all figured, the whole reason why they're coming out with a Switch Lite is essentially for Sword and Shield. I mean, that's basically the reason. It's a pretty tough sell trying to get people to spend $300 on a system just to play a core Pokemon game. I mean, last year it was a spin-off, was Let's Go, but this time it's a core Pokemon game. So trying to convince people to shell out that kind of money just for a brand new system to play the core game, I mean, it was going to be... I still think Sword and Shield would have sold well regardless, but it's definitely going to sell better now that they've essentially dropped the price by $100 and released a smaller system. It does kind of make me wonder, though, if we're going to get, like, some kind of special edition Pokemon system every single year. Because last year we had that Pikachu Eevee limited edition console, and now we've got the Zacian and Zamazenta one, so next year it will be something else, no doubt. But yeah, that's pretty much where we are with that. I'm still holding out hope for a Switch Pro. It looks like, at least from what's been circulating around the web these last few days, Nintendo is doing some kind of revision to the original Switch model. Something to do with the Tegra chip. I don't know if they're just putting in like a smaller chip or more energy efficient one, but I don't think that's going to have a huge effect on battery life or on running games. So if I were you, if you're just waiting for Nintendo to release like a much more powerful version of the Switch, just wait. We think that there is some type of Pro model coming. Maybe it'll be next year or the year after. That's when I will upgrade myself, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will upgrade as well. And that will be the one to watch out for, because at that point we're talking potentially running games a lot faster, minimizing load times, and getting something more than just an extra hour out of battery life, and that being pretty much it. Okay, so moving on. Next topic, we need to talk about Game Freak. So, it seems like I'm talking about Pokemon every single week here, and the fact of the matter is I am, because slowly but surely we're learning more and more information about Sword and Shield and the development behind them and the controversy and all that. It appears that we now know why there are issues with Sword and Shield. Not just in the graphical department, but also with the lack of having all the Pokemon and all that. So, this is what happened, and I do want to give credit to Sylph Spectre on YouTube, because he actually brought this to my attention in a video he uploaded, whereas up until now, I actually did not know this interview existed, so good on him for bringing this up to the forefront. So, here's what happened. Apparently, this was an interview done by Video Games Chronicle, and I'll leave the link down below in the description if you guys want to check this out. But VGC did an interview with one of the main programmers for Game Freak when it comes to the Pokemon series, and this guy's name is Masayuki Onoi. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm probably butchering it. But anyways, this guy actually explained that there are two different production teams at Game Freak, simply named Production Team 1 and Production Team 2. And Onoi explained that Team 1 is fully dedicated to Gear Project, and Team 2 is responsible for the Pokemon operation. And Gear Project is basically a bunch of new original game ideas that Game Freak has been working on to try and, I guess, expand their slate beyond simply being known for Pokemon. So things like Harmo Knight, Pocket Card Jockey, Tembo, Giga Wrecker, I guess Town would fall into this as well. All of those games are classified under Gear Project, and this is their main production team. They're focused on Gear Project, and the interview actually goes further, and Masayuki was quoted as saying, what that means is that Game Freak as a priority, or as a company rather, is prioritizing Gear Project more than Pokemon in general. We are always trying to create something that is equally exciting or more exciting than Pokemon. There's a lot of back and forth between Team 1 and Team 2. One of the interesting things is that Team 2, which is dedicated to Pokemon, only knows about specific platforms. So with Team 2, engineers can learn about other platforms that they might not have touched before, and by mixing the teams up, we are able to create this interesting synergy. And he also goes on further, saying it was a totally refreshing experience being able to move over from working on Pokemon to Giga Wrecker. Now, okay, here's the thing, right? First off, the reason this interview was overshadowed, I think, in my opinion, is because of the fact that this guy, Masayuki Inoi, he's not one of the, I guess, more well-known people at Game Freak, like Masuda or Ishihara at the Pokemon Company. So I think that in combination was the fact the article, which actually came out on May 22nd, it actually came out amidst a couple other things that were going on at the time, so it sort of got pushed to the back burner. That's why I think this was overlooked. But this is the problem with what's going on with Sword and Shield. So, just like I was talking about last week, how we were sort of going back and forth, right? Because on the one hand, obviously, we don't want these development companies to experience time crunch, having to rush out a game before it's complete. But on the other hand, when you actually read this full interview, it actually explains that the reason why Sword and Shield are missing Pokemon, the reason why we don't have Mega Evolutions or Z Crystals or all of these other mechanics, and the reason why the animations aren't as good as they could be, is because Game Freak is not prioritizing Pokemon. They've got two teams. One is dedicated towards original IPs, coming up with new games for Game Freak. The other is responsible for Pokemon, and the team that is coming up with the original IPs, that's the team that is basically being put in charge and given the priority over the Pokemon team. So that leads me to believe that the Pokemon team is understaffed, that it's obviously not as important to them because, again, Pokemon is going to sell 10, 15 million copies regardless. Which is sad because, I mean, we always want to push competition, we always want to push developers to be better than they are. And this is what's going on here. They've basically gotten complacent. They figure it's going to sell regardless of how much effort they put into the game. And this is what we're seeing. So it's a matter of them mismanaging their own internal development teams. I think that's the best way to put it. Because if Team 1 was in charge of Pokemon, or let me put it to you this way, instead of having two separate teams, if they decided just to create one team, have them work on Pokemon, focus on it, and then get that game out, and then afterwards work on original IPs, I mean, we wouldn't be running into this issue with Sword and Shield, but we are because they're spreading themselves too thin, and they're not really prioritizing a franchise which makes them billions of dollars every single year. It sucks. It really does. Now, here's the other thing too, and I do want to bring this up because this sort of ties into the Nintendo Switch Lite. There is something that I actually just thought of recently that I want your guys' opinions on here. The Nintendo Switch Lite can only play Switch games in handheld mode. But we are still paying home console prices for these same Switch games. So, do you think that is actually fair? Especially considering what's going on with Sword and Shield here. The fact that they aren't putting that much effort into Sword and Shield. The fact that with the Lite, you cannot play games on your TV as a home console game. That does make me question the price tag a little bit, because don't forget, when the Switch first came out and we were essentially told that all these games, especially the first party ones, were going to cost $60 each, some of us were annoyed, especially going up from the $40 price point of the 3DS games. But to be fair, at least for me anyways, I was okay with it, because here was a system that could be played either at home as a home console or on the go as a handheld. And as we've seen with Sony, PlayStation, Microsoft, Xbox, home console games, they retail for $60. Because the Switch could be used as a home console, $60, okay, that makes perfect sense. But now with the Switch Lite, the fact that it's handheld only, it's not 1080p, it's a handheld only system, and yet you are still paying the full $60 price tag as if you could play that game on a home console, but you can't. So, do you feel cheated a little? I don't know. I mean, again, if it were up to me, if I had the extra $100, I would just buy a core mainline Switch system itself. That way, it's justifying the cost of the games. That way, you have the option to either do TV mode or handheld. But it's just one more thing to consider. I mean, do you really want to spend $60 on games for your Switch Lite, even though they can't be played on your TV at home? Something to think about. Anyways, though, just getting back to the topic at hand here. What can I say, right? I mean, we know the answer now. Game Freak doesn't really care so much about Pokemon. I think maybe some of it has to do with Pokemon Go, because I could be wrong on this, but I think I remember reading an article saying how the owners of Pokemon, right, because it's split between Game Freak and TPCI and Nintendo themselves, it seems like maybe TPCI sees more benefit out of Pokemon Go. I don't like Pokemon Go, for the record. I don't have a smartphone, I don't own one, I don't have a cell phone either. But I just don't like Go itself. I don't like the way it's designed, I don't like the mechanics behind it. So I'm not a fan of it. But from what I remember reading, it seemed like TPCI was prioritizing Pokemon Go, I guess just because of the monetization, right? The microtransactions. So maybe this is why Game Freak doesn't care so much about the core series anymore, because they figure that TPCI is more interested in the mobile Go app, and people are gonna buy the core version regardless every time they come out with one. But still, it sucks. And I do want to address one other thing before we move on to our final topic of the night here. And this has to go sort of hand in hand with what's going on with the Pokemon fan community, and the fact that people are split and angry and annoyed at Masuda and everyone there who's working at Game Freak. I still think Masuda's an idiot. I really do. I mean, especially after that statement he put out a couple weeks ago, which basically reiterated the same thing he said during the E3 Treehouse presentation. Very, very poor judgment on his part to put that out there. But one of the comments that we got last week, this is from Arctic, and he posted, "Fans, all you guys have been doing is complaining about trees, animation, things that don't matter, and cut features that you never cared about with the exception of Mega Evolutions and maybe Pokemon following you. You are not fans." I think we need to differentiate legal and legitimate criticism over the people who are going overboard, especially the ones that are really just going completely over the edge here and making threats to Game Freak and Masuda. There's a difference, and the difference is, as a fan, or like in my case, as a Pokemon trainer for 20 plus years, I am allowed to offer my opinion. I'm allowed to criticize the games that I like playing. I mean, if people don't criticize things and we just accept things as they are, then nothing is ever going to change. Now, I don't care about that one tree that was pointed out that looked like a GameCube model. I mean, that really doesn't matter to me. And I just want to clarify that when it comes to the animations, it comes down to one of two things, right? I would be fine with the same animations that we've been getting on the 3DS, like the footprint for Score Bunny, or like the, just the punch animation where you see like a fist appear with Machoke using like a fighting type attack on the opponent. I would be okay with that if we had all the Pokemon. In reverse, I think that if we didn't have all the Pokemon, but the animations were up to a higher quality, a higher standard, like Masuda was claiming during the Treehouse presentation, incorrectly claiming at that, if the animations were better, then that would offset the actual lack of Pokemon for me. But I don't think you can go with both of those things and then still claim that these games are on a higher level of quality, because they're not. I mean, that's the problem. If you're going to have lower quality animations, then have all the Pokemon. If you're going to have higher quality animations, then okay, cut some Pokemon out. But don't have lower quality animations and also cut out Pokemon and at the same time claim that it's of a higher build quality, because that's just outright lying to your fan base, and that's going to result in outrage. The other thing too is, like I said, we still don't know how many Pokemon are in these games. We still don't know how long the story is, but just keep that in mind, because I am concerned that the story might be as short as X and Y, and that was 6 years ago on the 3DS, and I am also concerned that we're only going to be getting about 300 Pokemon, And like I said last week, if we can't get at least 500 Pokemon in Sword and Shield, there is going to be a legitimate outcry from fans. I really think that's going to happen here. I mean, you think things are bad right now? Imagine if 3 months from now we find out there are only 300 Pokemon in these games. 300 Pokemon out of close to 1,000, plus lower quality animations, or I should say the same quality animations as on the 3DS. That's not going to resonate well. Sorry, I mean, that's just the case here. And, look, I mean, I'm not as angry about this as I was about Paper Mario Color Splash, because, believe me, you can fight me on this tooth and nail, but Paper Mario Color Splash, that's its own disaster in and of itself. And Star Trek Discovery on television, that is just a complete train wreck, and I will yell at you for hours on end if you argue that is actually quality TV, because it is not. Pokemon, I'm not there yet, okay? I still want to give Sword and Shield a chance. I still am going to pick one of those 2 copies up, but that being said, we still need the ability to criticize game developers. We still need the ability to push them to do better when it comes to sequels. That's the only way things are ever going to change. And even though some people are going overboard and they are really just being insane, just keep in mind that a lot of this criticism, especially when it comes to the lack of Pokemon, the lack of the animations, the lack of voiceovers, because we haven't seen any scenes with voiceovers, and I can pretty much guarantee you there won't be any. This is valid, legitimate criticism, especially because of the fact that we're now paying $60. So the price has gone up 50%. The quality has not gone up 50%. It might have gone up 20%, but we're definitely paying 50% more. So, just another thing to keep in mind. Last but not least, we are going to end the night off with Nintendo and Miyamoto, and a very stupid and idiotic statement he made. And then again, should I be surprised? I mean, I used to respect Miyamoto after what he did with pretty much convincing the Paper Mario team to change direction with Sticker Star. And, of course, well, Star Fox Zero speaks for itself with the terrible motion controls. But we had I guess an article released, this was a couple days ago on IGN, of all places, where Nintendo held their annual general meeting of shareholders, and there was a question and answer session, and Miyamoto was talking to the investors. And apparently, one investor was asking the question about how Nintendo has been a little slow to join global trends such as cloud computing, mobile, VR, the fact that they are behind in terms of the online infrastructure on the Switch, which is true. I mean, we don't have a lot of features that are on the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One, for instance, right? Just as a prime example, well, cloud saves are not compatible with all games. We don't have local backups. We don't even have the ability to message friends on our friends list to, say, hey, I want to play Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Do you want to jump in game? We can't do that. We don't have native voice chat. We have to use this ridiculous app on smartphones, which again I can't use, so I'm just using Discord myself. Well, I mean, I think this pretty much speaks for itself, and this is on top of the issue with the Nintendo Online service as it is, the fact that we're paying for it now, and again, we're not really getting much more in terms of quality There's still a heck of a lot of lag. I mean, have you played Super Smash Bros. Ultimate online? Have you played Super Mario Maker 2? You get 4 people together, the lag is insane, and it's just absolutely intolerable at times. So, anyways, Miyamoto was asked about all of this at the shareholders meeting, and this is what he had to say. We have not fallen behind with either VR or network services. We worked on them from the very beginning and have been experimenting with them in a variety of ways. In that time, we've objectively evaluated whether they actually allow our consumers to have an enjoyable play experience and whether we can operate them at an appropriate cost. Because we don't publicize this until we release a product, it may look like we're falling behind. Where do I start with this? So, here's the thing, right? Regarding VR, I somewhat agree with him, okay? Up until now, I mean, Sony has been essentially leading the charge with VR when it comes to the home consoles. I really like PlayStation VR. I have not tried it myself. I'm waiting for the PlayStation 5 because of the solid-state drive, basically eliminating load times because of the supposed PSVR 2 that will be coming out later on. So I am waiting on that before I jump in. But I do like VR. I do think it's the future of gaming. I hope at some point we get to something similar to SAO, Sword Art Online. Maybe not with the whole idea of companies trapping people in games, but at least having some kind of full immersive experience. I would love for that to happen, especially with Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or something like that. So I understand what Miyamoto is saying in terms of VR, just testing the waters with Labo. Actually, that's another thing. I think Labo requires the Joy-Con, so that's another thing you won't be able to do with the Switch Lite. But anyways, I understand where he's coming from with that. He's still trying to figure out where Nintendo's stance is on that. I would be interested in seeing if Nintendo is actually going to expand on their VR Labo kit, or if it's just a one-off, but we'll see what happens there. But as far as the network services, pretty much we're all in agreement right now that Nintendo is behind in terms of the infrastructure. They're behind in terms of the servers. Their online service sucks. It is absolute trubbish. And in many ways, the 3DS and the Wii U actually had better online features than the Switch. Here we are in the 3rd year of the Switch being out, and we still don't have these features. So, at some point, it's like, who are you trying to fool? Who are you kidding? I mean, people know by now that the Switch is inferior, right? It's inferior in terms of hardware, it's inferior in terms of online capabilities. It shouldn't be. I don't think it's very difficult to add in a messaging system. I don't think it's difficult to add in themes or music in the eShop. At this point, I think it's more of Nintendo just choosing not to have these things. As to why, I don't know. I mean, they could use the privacy argument where they don't want people messaging random others across, halfway across the world. But then again, I mean, we're in 2019. I mean, come on, right? I mean, you can go on the internet, you can open up any chat room, and just randomly start talking with people you've never met or seen in your entire life. The other thing, too, some people have been putting out this idea that the reason why Nintendo's behind with the online stuff is because they're concerned about people hacking into their online servers and basically security issues with the infrastructure. Here's the problem, though. The Switch already, as it is, has issues with hacking. I mean, just take a look at the homebrew community, okay? Or take a look at Splatoon 2, right? I mean, again, this situation of, well, we can't offer cloud saves for Splatoon, we can't offer cloud saves for Yu-Gi-Oh!, we can't offer cloud saves for Pokemon, because we don't want people duplicating items or duplicating Pokemon, or basically getting around things like an Animal Crossing, so that's why we don't have this feature. But then again, people are still hacking into the game and manipulating the game's files and connecting the Switch to their computers and manipulating the coding, and at this point, it's like, come on. I mean, Nintendo, you have to get your act together. As far as cloud computing is concerned, cloud gaming, streaming, I don't think that'll ever be mainstream, at least not within the next 20 years, because, I mean, for that to happen, you need to have super fast internet speeds, a reliable low latency connection, and that would have to be across the country, so good luck in having that happen anytime soon. Even with 5G, I mean, we're a long ways off from that, but that being said, Nintendo does need to fix their online, and having Miyamoto just come out to the investors and basically say, no, our online is fine. It's like a facepalm moment. It's like, well, no, it's not fine, and again, I don't know if you... I don't know if Nintendo and Miyamoto actually understand where they lack in terms of the online functionality. Maybe they think their online service is the best thing since sliced bread. Maybe they're just looking through rose-colored glasses, I don't know, but obviously someone is just... someone needs to play on a PlayStation console or on an Xbox One and just see how much better Sony and Microsoft have their online functionality set up. And who knows, maybe by the time we get to the Switch 2.0 in another 4 years when the generation resets again, maybe at that point Nintendo will actually come out with a better online service. Again, especially since we're paying for it now. We're being forced to pay for it for games like Pokemon, Splatoon, Mario Party, Animal Crossing, Smash, and are they just taking our money and putting it in their pockets? Or are they actually going to reinvest that $20 a year into creating a better online service? I guess time will tell. So, that pretty much takes us to the end of tonight. I want you guys to let me know what you think on everything we went over. So whether that was a Nintendo Switch Lite, do you think it's actually worth it at $199? It probably is, but then again, I mean, if you already have a Switch, you're not gonna buy this. I mean, or are you? I mean, let me know if you're actually gonna spend an extra $200 on a second Switch console. I would be interested in finding that out. Also, what you think about the value of games. Do you think it's fair Nintendo is still charging you $60 even though the Switch Lite is only playing games in handheld mode? Are you gonna buy a Lite and then pay $60 for handheld-only games? What about Game Freak? The fact that they're no longer prioritizing Pokemon. Do you think that is a mistake? I do. I think that they need to start paying attention to their core fan base and start listening to them. But, I mean, let me know your thoughts on that. And last but not least, Miyamoto saying that Nintendo is not behind with their online service. Is this an April Fool's joke? I mean, was he trying to be funny? Is he doing stand-up comedy? I don't know, but he's definitely not fooling anyone, and he's sort of... He's hitting us gamers, or us hardcore gamers, where it hurts the most, which is the fact that we are now paying for a service that is offering less than what we would be getting from Microsoft or Sony. If you guys enjoyed tonight's episode of GameView, make sure, once again, hit that like button. It really does help out. Subscribe to TOONDISE. Make sure to hit that bell icon for notifications. Also, we are on Discord. We are on Twitter at TOONDISE, and we also have a website, toondise.com. Make sure you check it out and vote in our surveys. I'll be back next Friday night, 9/8 Central, for another episode of GameView. And next week, we are going to talk Paper Mario on the Switch. Yes, we are going to talk about it. And I'm also going to provide some insight on a game that is very, very similar to Paper Mario, but that's actually out right now on the Switch. Make sure you stay tuned for that, because if you are experiencing a Paper Mario drought like I am, you're going to want to pick this one up. I'll see you guys next Friday night. Until then, I'm Scott. I'll catch you guys later.